Greetings, this is Father Michael with our word of the week. This week's word is vows. And when we think about taking a vow, we understand it's a kind of sacred oath or promise. And perhaps for most people, the vow that they would make has to do when they get married. The sacrament that a man and a woman would give to one another in that moment when they promise to do what? to take the other person, to give themselves fully, freely, faithfully, forever, for better or for worse, right? Richer or poor, in sickness and in health, all the days of our life, or until death do us part. So we understand that vow is one, when we make it, it's primarily in order to bring down the blessing of God in a unique and often sacramental way. As religious, we take three different vows, or in fact implied that blessing to God, or that sense of calling down God's blessing in our lives. As Dominican, that takes the evangelical counsels of chastity, poverty, and finally obedience. This week, a number of our men, in fact 7 who have been novices, who have been wearing that habit for more than a year, will make their very first vows to God to live in a Dominican way, to be part of the community. And you might say, well, they've already been living it for a year. And that's really the insight of St. Dominic. That is, he welcomed those to join his endeavor, but said, take some time. Live the life, experience the life, and if that life seems suitable to you, and if you seem suitable to us, then and only then enter into the fullness of the community. For Dominican, from the beginning all the way to final solemn vows for life is a period of 5 years of vows. So connected to a year of novitiate and the years of diaconate and priesthood, 8 years in total from coming to the Dominicans to being ordained as a Dominican priest, should God be calling you to, not simply the religious life, but also to priesthood as well. As these 7 men make vows, causes me to reflect upon the vows that I have made in a solemn way until death. And those vows are explicitly contained in the one vow of obedience. When we place our hands in the hands of our superior and say, I promise, what do I promise? What do I vow? I promise obedience. Obedience comes from the word to listen. And it means that my life is radically transformed to listen to God through the community, through my superiors, and certainly in our own prayer time together, to always be available to God's calling in my life. And as part of the context for that, the best way in which the Lord has called me and all Dominicans to minister is to connect that obedience, that listening, to a life of chastity. And not just chastity, because we're all called to chastity, but celibacy in that way. To give up wife and family for the sake of being available for community and to minister to the gospel. And then finally, poverty. Unlike St. Francis, St. Dominic did not see poverty as an end in itself, just being poor or simple for the sake of it, but always towards the preaching of the gospel. St. Dominic's experience was, when he began to preach to those who were spiritual but not religious, they were living a very simple lifestyle. And they saw all the regalia and wealth of the church as being an impediment to receiving the fullness of the gospel. And so St. Dominic's attitude and behavior was one to divest himself of all material wealth in order that he might be effective as a preacher of the gospel. And so as Dominicans, we have no money of our own, no sense in which we are financially independent, but we pool all of our resources towards living together so that we might preach the gospel effectively. As you keep these 7 young men who have made their now first simple vows, may we all reflect on the power of obedience, of chastity, of purity, and of poverty, simplicity of life, that the Lord might indeed bless those who have made vows and bless all of us in pursuing the gospel, preaching and radiating his joy. Amen. Amen.